The original idea for German-trained Chinese divisions was proposed by the famous World War I general Hans von Sicht in 1934. At the time, von Sicht was serving as the German military advisor to Chiang Kai-shek, the leader of the Republic of China. He planned to reorganize the Chinese military into 60 or 80 divisions, sources differ between the two numbers, that were to be modeled after German divisions. However, von Sicht would soon leave China due to health reasons, and his successor, General Alexander von Falkenhausen, would continue the reorganization process until his return to Germany in 1938 due to diplomatic pressures from Japan, Germany's new ally. The reorganization process was to be carried out in groups. The first group of units were chosen by mid-1935 and consisted of the Central Military Academy Training Unit, the 2nd, 11th, 14th, 25th, 36th, 57th, 67th, and 87th Divisions. By late 1935, the second group was chosen, which consisted of the 3rd, 4th, 6th, 9th, 10th, 27th, 80th, 83rd, 88th, and 89th Divisions. Due to political and military incidents that occurred in China in 1936, the 3rd and 4th groups weren't chosen until 1937, the same year that war started with Japan. As a result, the reorganization process of the 3rd group, totaling 10 divisions, was never completed. The 4th group of 10 divisions was even worse off, as they were unable to even start their rearmament process. Before I continue, it is important to point out that the Central Military Academy Training Unit was different from the other German-trained divisions. It was the only unit that was comparable to a German infantry unit at the time, which made it the best among the German-trained units, and without a doubt, superior to all other units in China. In terms of the other units, although the reorganization was based off German divisions, the number of weapons and equipment available to them were far inferior to an actual German division. Since this video only talks about the standard German-trained division, the information presented does not necessarily apply to the training unit of the Central Military Academy. The smallest unit of the division is a squad, known as a ban in Chinese. A full Chinese squad is supposed to consist of 14 men, which is a bit larger than a German infantry squad. In reality, however, many squads were unable to reach their full strength, especially after the commencement of hostilities, meaning that many squads were similar in size to a World War II-era German infantry squad. Similar to a German squad, the Chinese squad was centered around a light machine gun. Although the German-made MG-34 had been imported, their numbers were extremely limited. Instead, the light machine gun of the Chinese infantry squad was the ZB-26. The ZB-26 light machine gun was a Czechoslovakian-manufactured light machine gun and would be used to equip the Chinese military throughout World War II. There was also a domestically produced Chinese version manufactured under license. The ZB-26 was both respected and feared by the Japanese, and Japanese troops would often use captured examples against the Chinese, especially earlier on in the war. The machine gunner of the squad carried 4 to 6 magazines in a chest rig, while the assistant gunner carried the rest. Doctrine called for single shot or burst fire when shooting at distant enemies, while automatic fire was reserved for enemies close to the machine gunner's position. This was due to the limited magazine capacity of the ZB-26, only being able to hold 20 rounds. However, one of the most important features of the ZB-26 was its ammunition interchangeability with the standard infantry rifles. Chambered in 7.62 by 57mm, more commonly known as 8mm Mauser, the ZB-26 utilized the same ammunition as the 8mm rifles that the riflemen carried. There were many different types of 8mm rifles used by the Chinese military, but they were mainly 8mm Mauser rifles with a Model 98 action. Examples include the German Standard Model, the Czech VZ-24, and the Belgian FN 1930. These are only a few of the examples, as there are too many to name in this video. However, One important model was the Chinese Type 24 Chiang Kai-shek rifle, a domestically produced variant of the German standard model. These would be used throughout World War II and the Chinese Civil War, with production only stopping in 1949. A notable exception was the Hanyang 88. This rifle had been in production since the late 1800s and production continued into World War II. If you would like to know more about the Hanyang 88, you can visit USNA 98's channel, as he has multiple videos on this rifle. I have included the link in the description. The squad commander was typically an NCO and was armed with a variant of the C96 pistol. The squad commanders were also armed with a submachine gun, another aspect that was similar to a German squad. The submachine gun of choice was usually a variant of the German MP-18, with many being domestically produced, while others were bought from other countries. Although in theory similar to the Germans, where the submachine gun is issued to NCOs and junior officers, in actuality, many units found it especially hard to find enough submachine guns, especially after the fighting had started. As a result, submachine guns were often concentrated into assault teams, which were then used to storm enemy positions and try to overwhelm the defenders with their automatic firepower, a tactic which bears some resemblance to those used by German stormtroopers of World War I. 3 of these infantry squads formed an infantry platoon, known in Chinese as a pai, and 3 infantry platoons formed an infantry company, known as a lian in Chinese. A battalion, also known as a ying, consisted of 3 infantry companies and 1 machine gun and mortar company. The machine gun and mortar company may also be known as the machine gun company. The role of this company was to provide support using heavier weapons that is not usually available to your standard infantry companies. Notably, this included 6 heavy machine guns and 2 mortars. The heavy machine gun of choice was the Chinese Type 24 heavy machine gun, a domestically produced variant of the German MG08, although original MG08s were also present. The mortar used in these German-trained units was the domestically produced Type 20 82mm mortar. The Type 20 mortar was a variant of the French 81mm Brandt Model 27/31 mortar, with the most noticeable difference being the larger caliber. Above a battalion, there is a regiment, in Chinese known as a tuán. There are 3 infantry battalions in each regiment. Furthermore, attached to regimental HQ, there is a dedicated mortar company, equipped with 6 additional 82mm Type 20 mortars. In addition, there is a light artillery company that possessed 6 20mm autocannons, a spec ops company, as well as a communications or signals company. Each regiment may also have a transport platoon and a stretcher platoon attached to it. The 20mm autocannons in the light artillery company were most often multi-purpose anti-aircraft guns imported from various different companies and countries. The most common were the Madsen 20mm, the Breda Model 35, as well as the Solothurn ST5. It should be noted that the main 20mm autocannons used by the German Wehrmacht during the war, the Flak 30 and the Flak 38s, were in fact an improved ST5 design, and looking at the photos, there is definitely a resemblance between the two. 2 regiments formed a brigade, known in Chinese as a lü, and 2 brigades formed a division, known as a shi. Besides the 2 infantry brigades, the division also consisted of an artillery battalion, an engineer battalion, a communications or signals battalion, a transport battalion, a spec ops battalion, and a divisional field hospital. The German-trained divisions were one of the few units in China that had a large quantity of motorized vehicles. Many different makes and models were used by the transport battalion, including German-manufactured ones, and some of the more well-known models include the Mercedes-Benz L2000 and L3000, the same trucks that were used by the German Wehrmacht. Some sources state that the famous Opel Blitz was also exported to China by the German government. Despite my best efforts, I was unable to find any conclusive photographic evidence of this truck being used by these Chinese divisions. However, the production of the Opel Blitz commenced in the 1930s, a period which coincides with the export of military equipment to China, so it is quite possible that at least some did make it over there. The artillery battalion possesses the largest caliber guns in the entire infantry division. It is divided into 3 artillery companies, an anti-tank company, as well as an anti-aircraft company. Each artillery company was armed with 4 Krupp 7.5 cm Model 1903 field guns. As the battalion had 3 artillery companies, it had a total of 12 7.5 cm field guns at its disposal. The anti-tank company was armed with 4 of the famous 3.7 cm Pak 35/36 anti-tank guns that were imported directly from Germany. The anti-aircraft company had 4 20mm anti-aircraft guns, with the most common models already being covered when we talked about the light artillery company. Anti-aircraft units were also given German-made equipment in addition to weapons. This picture was taken by Life magazine photographer Karl Meidens in early 1941, outside the Chinese capital of Chongqing, also known back then as Chungking. The searchlight that the soldiers are operating is likely a German-made 150 cm searchlight, something that the Germans themselves would use extensively during the war. German-made acoustic locators were also imported, and before the time of radar, were an excellent early warning system. They were often used together with searchlights to aid in their aiming at planes. This image, likely taken at the same time and place as the previous one, shows Chinese troops operating one of these sound locators. The device can pick up the sound of planes and transmit them to the headsets worn by soldiers operating the system. By rotating the device, an accurate elevation and bearing of the aircraft can be acquired. These units would also be used by the German Wehrmacht, especially during the early years of World War II. This sums up the organization and equipment of a standard German-trained Chinese infantry division. However, for those who are a bit more familiar with the subject, you may have noticed that there were some German equipment and weapons that I have not mentioned. I think it would be a shame not to point out some of the more well-known examples in this video. Please be aware that these were not provided to the standard reorganized divisions and were instead given to specialized units and/or the Chinese Central Military Academy training unit. This is far from a comprehensive list, and instead, I will only point out some of the very famous ones that were also widely used by the German Wehrmacht during the Second World War. This includes Panzer I tanks, the 221, 222, and 223 series of armored reconnaissance vehicles, 10.5 cm light field howitzers, and the 15 cm heavy field howitzers, as well as the Henschel tractors or trucks used to pull them. And with that, we come to an end of this video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you have any questions or suggestions, please leave them in the comments. I hope to see you all next time.